It was a very mixed life. I was born in Texas at 26, and my dad worked in the insurance world. In the crash of 29, he lost his job. He moved the family, which was 3 young kids, to Chicago, where he worked, not making much money. And in 38, he died. He had rheumatic fever as a child, and it killed him when he was 1938, when he was 39 years old. My mom was 36, left her with 5 young kids and no money. She moved us to Oklahoma, where she'd been born and raised, and she had a brother. We lived there for a couple of years. Then we moved to California, where my mother's mother lived. And then the war started, and the economy was better for our family, at least. I worked, my mother worked. And when I graduated from high school, I was 17. I joined an Army Reserve college program. They sent me to Stanford for 2 quarters. And then I went to basic training, and the program, I was supposed to go back, the program got canceled. And I wound up in Patton's Third Army in the infantry in Europe. And on May 4th, 4 days before VE Day, I had a bullet hit my femur, shattered 6 inches of the bone. I spent 6 months in a hospital, in hospitals, first in Austria, which is where we were for a few nights, then in England, then a hospital ship, then a hospital train to LA, then another hospital. When I got discharged in December of 45, you couldn't get into a 4-year college unless you were at least a junior. So I went to community college for 6 months, and no, for a year and a half. Then I was a junior. Took a test, got admitted to UCLA. I was studying civil engineering, and somewhere along the line I realized they didn't have a senior year because they didn't have the labs. So I got automatically admitted to Berkeley, which is sort of a funny story. Stanford, UCLA, and Berkeley, just for an undergraduate degree. And then I went to work, a variety of jobs, California Division of Highways, oil company, a couple water districts. I was city engineer in 3 different cities. And in '58, I started my own consulting business. And grew it pretty well, and then sold it to PRC in 1970. And I ran my own company within PRC for 3 years. Then I became a corporate vice president and managed all of their engineering companies, which was about 40% of the company. Work all over the world, though. We had engineering offices in London, Italy, Spain, and worked in Africa, Saudi, Iran, Nigeria. It was a combination. The interesting thing was I was city engineer in Fullerton, then I was assistant city manager and the manager of Orange County Water District, a unique district. Didn't sell water to customers, it replenished the groundwater basin. He came to me and said, "John, come to work for us for 2 years, and then you can leave and start a consulting business, and you would be our primary consultant." Well, I joined them in 1970, and I left them in '86 when we sold the company. I knew I wanted to come out here, and somehow I met Bill Peterson and Till Hazel. And so Bill came down and talked to me about building us a building. And I still remember Bill and I and about 4 attorneys or 5 attorneys, and we couldn't get anything done because the attorneys were arguing back and forth. Until, Milt and I said, "Let's step out." We took a little card and wrote down what we agreed to, gave it back to our attorneys and said, "Now, this is the deal, write it up." And they built that building for us, which was almost 5,000 square feet, as I recall. 450,000 square feet, I should say, 6 floors. Yes, particularly in the information technology part, a lot of that was government work. Although we had 1,000 people at Kennedy Space Center, we worked on everything that stayed on the ground at Kennedy. Our guys did something called WMIX, Worldwide Military Command and Control. We did that's a big project, and other things. It was sold to Emhart, whose CEO was on our board. 2 years later, Emhart got sold. Again, the same thing got put into play, and Black & Decker bought them because Emhart was more similar to Black & Decker and Black & Decker didn't want PRCs, so they sold us to Lytton out in California, and that got bought by Northrop Grumman. And Northrop Grumman is headquartered here now, as you know. So, small world. Well, in our type of business anyway, there were 4 or 5 major players. CSC, which was not headquartered here, but it was the strongest, I think. But DynCorp and BDM, PRC, those 4 companies, none of which started here. We all moved here for some reason. And my early remembrance is somehow we all got involved in George Mason. And we used to, about that same group of people, have dinner at George Mason at the Matthey House with George Johnson and his wife every month or so. And mainly focused on George Mason's needs. Because as you probably know, the other universities in the state didn't want George Mason to exist. And the people in Richmond didn't give George Mason full money. They gave him like 50 cents for every dollar that the other places got. And we went to Richmond and argued, and we worked for George Mason. And then, that same group then sort of worked on other issues, local issues, and got to know the Board of Supervisor people and our Congress people. Yes, but at that time, if you added up all of our employees living here, there was collectively quite a few. So we had some significant presence, and nobody else did. There was no other large company here. And so it was different. Today, there's a jillion companies here. Well, there's a lot more competition now, so it is different in that sense. And I don't know if the government employees are any different. I suppose they are. Back then, when they didn't have many choices as to who to give the contract to, they just sort of split it up between those 5 or 6, maybe 10 companies in the area. Today, it's completely different. Big companies, small companies. Well, the one at Kennedy Space Center would be one of them. And overseas, like we designed 2 naval ports in Iran. I don't know what encouraged each of us to get involved, but I guess we all felt there was a need to have a better university here. And so we did, and got to know George Johnson and his wife, and help him and understand what Richmond's views were. And over time, I think we played a major role in getting George Mason more money. Today, as you know, it's the largest university in the state, and heavily recognized on the research that it does. Well, I think we need better transportation within the county, or within the region, really. You can't say solve transportation by a county. It's got to be within the region. And, there's something called the 2030 group that's working on that. It's funny, that group started because I was one of the founders of it. Our question was, who's going to be the leaders, business leaders in the year 2030? That was what we were thinking about. But we got sidetracked into the regional issues, and rightly so, because transportation particularly is best solved on the regional basis. But that would be one thing I think needs to be done, is better transportation. Probably more low-cost housing close in. If you have low-cost housing out of ways, it just increases traffic. Well, I have to say I enjoyed it immensely. I I feel, just a lot of enjoyment what was going on, being involved in something like that. So you knew it was meaningful and helpful, and interacting with Chuck College, Till Hazel, Milt Peterson, all of those guys. They're all one of a kind.